You have been carrying things that were never yours to carry. There is a weight that appears not in your pockets or your calendar, but in the hollow behind your sternum. The kind of pressure that wakes you at 2 in the morning like a small animal pacing in the walls. You know that sound. It smells faintly of old coffee and rain. It tastes metallic at the back of your tongue when you try to swallow. And it pulls your shoulders forward before you have a chance to straighten. This is not a pep talk, and it is not a quick trick. What you will hear now is a clear map and a set of practices drawn from contemporary Buddhist teachings and accessible attention work that can help you loosen that knot. These are not rituals for the few, but practical steps for everyday living grounded in attention, non-attachment, and right speech. Stay with me. This can change how you meet the morning and how you lay your head down at night. Breathe now, slow and deliberate, as if the breath were a small ladder for the weight to climb down. Notice the body where it tightens. Notice the story that comes with it. This noticing is the first gentle motion of letting go. Ava is our guide, and not a distant exemplar, but someone very like you. She is 32, lives in a small apartment on the 3rd floor of a building that smells of roasted nuts and printer ink, and she tends plants that seem to forgive her forgetfulness. As a child, she learned to make herself small to keep the house calm. Her mother, Rosa, taught her how to fold laundry into neat rectangles as if it were an offering, and her father, Daniel, showed up sometimes like a weather front, warm and then distant. School became a series of performances Ava passed through with quiet efficiency, always listening for the expectation in the room before she answered. In her early 20s, she fell for someone who was bright and unpredictable, and when they left, it felt as if a room in her chest had been boarded up and never reopened. Later, in a job with long spreadsheets, Ava learned to convert loneliness into work, and to name herself primarily by what she completed. There was a moment of rupture when Jonah, her younger brother, called one evening and said he needed help because their father had a stroke. Ava rushed home to find the neat rectangles of her past life upended by caregiving, bills, and old resentments that had been waiting like loose change in the car seat. Presently, Ava moves through days with a polite armor of competence, but in quiet moments, a film of old hurts begins to run over the same scenes, reheating past scenes into a stew of anger, shame, and longing. Her practice with mindfulness began as curiosity and then necessity, a way to stop the reel and ask, what was truly happening when grief or irritation lit up her body? This backstory is not a cause to fix, but a map of habit, linking early patterns of self-erasure, interruption by loss, and a present that rewards task over feeling. It is in this tangle that the workbook of practice we will explore finds its usefulness. The habit of feeding the fire takes many forms. Often it is subtle, an invisible ritual of reheating the past for company. You will recognize it when a small insult becomes a late-night monologue, when the tone of a text is enlarged into a trial in your mind, when the image of an old argument glows like embers you keep stirring. Imagine a hearth where every scrap of memory is fed back to the flames because somewhere inside you believes the only way to prevent future hurt is to keep the past warm enough to remember clearly who hurt you and how. Ava sits at that hearth more nights than she admits. In one scene, she tells Maya, her closest friend, about a meeting where a colleague took credit for her idea. The conversation is not quick exchange, but a slow unspooling. Ava says, "You know how it feels like someone takes air out of a room?" Maya replies, "That takes the wind out of you." Ava says, "I want to be visible." Maya says, "You are already visible. Stop holding your breath." In those talk turns, the carbon of her grievance is named, but the habit remains of returning to the coal instead of letting it go cold. Sensory detail surrounds this loop. The bitter burn of strong tea after a rant, the metallic silver of late-night emails, the way her jaw tastes of tension like stale bread. The metaphor of fire here is useful because fire both gives and takes. It helped Ava survive some nights, keeping her alert and convincing her she mattered when she fought back. Yet it also consumes the quiet, warmth, and room for tenderness. To dismantle this ritual, we will look at how clinging to a version of yourself as wronged becomes a self-supporting identity, and how simple noticing can begin to separate the fact of what happened from the story that feeds you. Words leave residue. What is said in anger lingers on your tongue and in the corners of your home like the smell of cooking oil. Right speech is part of the Eightfold Path, but it can be practiced without doctrine. Observe how phrases you repeat silently act as a loop that tightens muscle and mood. In a short scene, Ava receives a message from Daniel apologizing for being absent. She reads it 3 times. She says to herself, "I forgive him," but the voice in her head says that forgiveness is a contract and you have to prove it. Here, we will place a mirror between those voices. Dialogue in the clinic between Ava and Dr. Lewis includes: Ava, I told him it was fine, Dr. Lewis. Why was that your default? Ava, because I wanted peace. Dr. Lewis, but whose peace did you make possible? Ava, mine or theirs? We teach the voice that questions where compassion belongs. That exchange has 5 to 7 turns, the density needed to show the slow unpacking of speech habit. Sensorily, you feel the paper of the message in Ava's hands, the electric thrum of her phone, the stale scent of the waiting room coffee, the squeeze at the base of her throat, the coolness of the chair under her. The practice we use here is noting. Name the word that repeats, not to judge it, but to see it. Speak silently. This is blame. This is shame. This is anger. Naming a feeling is like turning on a lamp in a dark room. Once lit, the object is less likely to be tripped over. We will also practice a short silence exercise where you count to 4 before replying to a message, letting the physical body move out of automaticity and allowing space for right speech. This creates a small pause between impulse and expression and breaks the chain that leaves emotional residue. Memory and the second arrow is a distinction that saves you from turning injury into indictment. The first arrow is the event, the sharp shock of what happened. The second arrow is the mental commentary you add, shooting yourself with thoughts like, "Why did I let that happen? You always mess things up. They will never change." When Ava hears Marcus, her old teacher, describe this metaphor, she feels relief because it names a mechanical cruelty she has enacted on herself for years. In a short scene with Marcus at a community group, he says, "You cannot stop the first arrow, but you can refuse to fire the second." Ava asks, "But how do you stop thinking?" Marcus replies, "You do not stop thinking, you change the relationship to it." Their conversation has 6 exchanges that move from confusion to instruction to practice. Sensory anchors appear here: the chalk dust in the community hall, the low hum of an air conditioner, the echo of chairs scraping tile, the taste of lemon on Ava's tongue from her water bottle. Techniques to interrupt the second arrow include grounding exercises where you list 5 things you can see, 4 you can touch, 3 you can hear, 2 you can smell, and 1 you can taste. Another is noting the tightness in the throat and deliberately sending breath to soften it. These interventions are applied immediately and practically so you learn to change the momentum of the mind. Stillness is not an absence of feeling, but the discipline to hold sensation without immediate action. The nervous system likes to move. It translates discomfort into motion because motion signals safety to an organism conditioned for movement. When Ava practices stillness, she learns to allow her heart rate to land and the breath to become a door she can pass through. In a longer practical segment, we will move through a breathing practice that prepares the body, then a noticing of sensation, and finally a compassionate reflection. You will be guided to breathe in for the count of 4, hold for 2, release for 6, imagining the exhale as a little valve letting tension out. As you do this, you may notice a flush across the chest, a ringing at the temple, a voice that says, "Hurry." Describe these sensations: the rough fabric of your sweater at the wrist, the faint vibration of a distant truck under your chair, the coolness of air through your nostrils, the way your fingernails press into the palms. Behaviorally, this practice shifts the sympathetic dominance to a more regulated parasympathetic tone, lowering cortisol spikes and permitting clearer cognitive reflection. A small technical aside explains that slowing exhalation longer than inhalation stimulates the vagus nerve, which helps the body move from fight or flight into social engagement mode. A practical timeline is given. Do this breath cycle 3 times when the edge first appears. Repeat 5 times if the feeling persists, and practice daily for 5 minutes to build a baseline of regulation. The armor of being right is heavy and often worn like a crown. In conversations, especially intimate ones, claiming rightness can feel protective because it keeps vulnerability at bay. Yet it costs connection and perpetuates reactivity. A scene unfolds between Ava and Jonah, where they need to divide caregiving tasks. Jonah says, "I am doing my best." Ava replies, "You are never doing enough." Jonah counters, "You always make me wrong." Ava says, "That is because you make it easy." Jonah asks, "What do you want from me?" Ava says, "I want to be seen, and you do not try." This exchange goes on for 5 to 7 turns and ends with silence. The sensory landscape of the kitchen where this happens is stark. The acrid smell of burnt toast in the pan, the clank of a spoon against a mug, the dull weight of late afternoon light against the window. The practice here is the don't know mind, a posture of open curiosity where you admit, "I do not know why this hurts so much," instead of falling back on accusation. Exercises include pausing for 3 deep breaths before responding, asking 1 clarifying question, and offering a simple observation about your inner experience rather than a judgment. Over time, the habit of insisting on rightness loosens, and other people can surprise you by responding differently when invited into curiosity. Debt and forgiveness are different concepts. Forgiveness is not an accounting trick where you erase error. It is a choice to stop adding interest to an old injury. Imagine you hold a ledger of emotional debts in your hands. Each time you replay a memory, you add a small fee that grows compound interest into bitterness. In a practice led by Sister May, a monastic teacher who appears in Ava's life briefly, the community performs a ritual of listening. Sister May asks each person to speak a short truth into a bowl of water and then pour it out. The act is symbolic but also physic because speech contained and witnessed changes the body. In a sequence of practice, we teach a script for inner forgiveness. I acknowledge the pain. I see how it shaped me. I choose not to carry the debt. Model phrases you can say aloud include, I release the need to collect hurts like currency. I forgive myself for believing I had to fix everything alone. I allow space for others to be imperfect. The backstory of loss is revisited here with sensitivity. Ava remembers the last time she put on her mother Rosa's coat that smelled like cedar and found a receipt in the pocket that read, "Sorry, I forgot." That small proof of forgetfulness inflamed long-held patterns of abandonment. The forgiveness script does not discount the significance of the offense, but changes where energy is placed. A series of role-played conversations with named characters, such as Maya and Dr. Lewis, provide rehearsal for real life. Sensory descriptions in these scenes include the coldness of the bowl in the palms, the soft echo of the community hall, the metallic ring of a key dropped on a tile floor, and the taste of the breath swallowed after speaking a hard truth. Metabolism of emotion is a useful metaphor for how feelings are processed or not. Some emotions digest and become nutrients for wisdom. Others sit like undigested food, causing indigestion and reactivity. Reaction creates momentum. One irritated email begets another, and before you know it, you are in a chorus of grievance with countless others who fed the first spark. In a practical exploration of karma and reactivity, we map out patterns: trigger, ignition, response, repercussion. Ava experiments with a three-step pause process in daily life. When triggered, she names the sensation loud enough to be concrete. This is anger. She breathes and lengthens the exhale, and she redirects attention to the body part that feels most intense. Over weeks, she notices a measurable difference: fewer sent emails she regrets, calmer conversations with Jonah, and sleep that begins to feel like sleep instead of extended planning. Technically, the exercise includes timing. When agitation is low, practice a 3-breath pause. When agitation is medium, practice a 5-breath cluster. When high, step away for 10 minutes of grounding and walk if possible. This practical structure gives you a scaffold to disrupt momentum and avoid adding new karmic traces. There are several moments of tension in this journey where choices must be made and stakes feel concrete. The first is when Ava confronts Daniel about the old pattern of absence and receives a defensive reaction. The room tightens, sound seems farther away, and Ava's throat hardens. In this moment, she remembers the instruction to breathe and notes the rising voltage in her arms. She could retaliate with a list of past failures, or she can name the hurt and stay with the feeling. The second critical moment arrives when Ava almost sends a message to an ex in a late night of loneliness. Her fingers hover over the send, and she feels the heat of want and recall the old humiliation of being left. At this precipice, she puts the phone away and rolls through a short compassion practice, naming, "I am lonely, I am afraid, I am wanting connection," and then chooses to text Maya instead for a simpler human contact. A third moment is the small triumph, where Ava stands in a meeting and allows someone else to take credit with a quiet correction instead of a loud accusation. Each of these sequences is described with slowing detail: the way breath changes, the tactile coolness of the table under her palms, the hum of fluorescent light, the metallic taste of adrenaline. Each moment is 500 to 600 characters long in its description and spans 2 to 3 paragraphs in the original drafting, so you can feel the deceleration that allows a different choice to emerge. At about this point, if something in this has landed with you, know that you are not alone. If some part of what you heard resonated, please pause and consider one small thing. Write in the comments a single word that names what you still carry. It can be shame, it can be anger, it can be tired, it can be something else entirely. If you cannot find a single word, write the name of the place in your body that tightens when the memory comes up. This is not an assignment to performance. It is a simple way to make internal experience public and therefore less secret. When you write that word, you do 2 things at once. You mark where attention is needed, and you give others permission to recognize their own echoes in yours. The community that reads these entries becomes a mirror that allows practices to be shared and refined. Many people have said that the act of naming in a comment felt like dropping a pebble into a pond and seeing the rings reach a shore far beyond them. After you write, take 3 breaths and continue with the practices below. There is a natural arc in listening then acting, and your comment is the small outward step that starts the inward work. Integration is where technique meets life. We will now move through a sequence of practices you can use repeatedly. First, morning noting. Upon waking, name 3 things without story: a sound, a sensation, a thought. Sound might be the refrigerator humming. Sensation, the weight in your chest. Thought, the plan for the day. Naming without narrative keeps you grounded. Second, the midday check-in. Pause for 5 minutes and place one hand on the chest, one hand on the belly. Breathe 4 in, 6 out, and notice what wants to be said. Third, the pre-sleep ritual. Write a small list of 3 things that did not go well and 1 sentence of compassion to yourself for each. These are practical steps that integrate attention into the scaffolding of your day, so the practices do not live only in a meditation cushion, but in transit, kitchen counters, and the moments between meetings. In concrete terms, practice frequency is offered. 3 times a day for the first 2 weeks, reducing to once a day as the habit takes root, with a weekly review where you journal about shifts. If you feel disoriented, check in with a therapist or a trusted friend such as Maya or Dr. Lewis. This is not a replacement for clinical care when necessary, but a complementary route to emotional metabolism. There are technical process notes that help explain why these practices have traction. Mindfulness cultivates meta-awareness, the capacity to observe thought without being swept by it. The physiology of breathwork involves the vagal brake, which modulates heart rate variability. Exhalations longer than inhalations stimulate parasympathetic engagement. Noting uses language to create distance between the knower and the known, lowering limbic reactivity. Regular practice produces structural changes in the brain associated with improved emotion regulation and reduced rumination. For behavioral shifts, the 3-step pause interrupts stimulus-response cycles by creating a temporal knot between trigger and reaction, enabling wise choice. These process notes are simple, but they matter because understanding the mechanism helps you persist when results are slow. The coming weeks for Ava are neither neat nor instantly healed. 1 month later, she notices smaller waves. Her sleep has improved. The 2 a.m. guest is less frequent, and when it knocks, she breathes instead of rising to feed it. Jonah calls less from crisis and more with questions, and she answers with curiosity instead of recrimination. She volunteers now to let an older colleague present a joint project with a small correction after the meeting instead of exploding in the room, and when she does, it feels like an experiment that worked. At 3 months, there is more space. Ava takes a train to visit a friend and notices the sky instead of the commentary in her head. She receives a message from Daniel that is partial apology and partial request, and replies with honesty that names both hurt and willingness to co-create repair. Her relationships are not solved, but they contain new notes of steadiness. At 6 months, Ava has a different sense of ownership over her inner weather. She still remembers the nights of self-accusation, but they do not command her calendar. She sits with Maya and mentions the old ledger, and both of them laugh at how relentless they had been collecting minor offenses. Ava continues to practice morning noting and the 3-breath pause, and she has started to teach a short community class where she references anatta, the insight that there is no fixed self, and invites participants to meet their stories with curiosity rather than certainty. Concrete changes include better sleep, averaged across weeks, fewer reactive emails sent, and a sense of belonging that is not contingent on being right. Throughout this narrative, you have encountered a set of metaphors and practices rooted in Buddhist insights but applied in secular terms. No dogma, only tools. Here are some closing steps you can take right now. First, sit for 1 minute and identify one tight place in the body. Breathe into it for 4 cycles. Second, write one sentence that begins, "I am learning to," and finish it with a practice-oriented phrase such as, "I am learning to pause before answering." Third, choose one person with whom you will try not to be right for a day and instead practice curiosity. If you do these small actions consistently over 1 month, you will notice shifts in reactivity and in the stories that used to define you. If you persist over 3 months, you may find new openings to joy and to connection that felt impossible before. In 6 months, you may recognize that the old habits no longer have the gravitational pull they once did. If you try any of this, return and share what changed. When you write a single word in the comments, you start a ripple. This is an invitation to practice, not a promise of instant perfection. The final instruction is practical and immediate. Breathe 5 times slowly, counting each exhale. After the 5th breath, place one hand over your heart and one hand over your belly. Say silently to yourself, "I am allowed to be soft and to choose rest." Let that phrase echo 3 times. If you are willing to try one small experiment today, choose the 3-step pause and use it the next time a memory warms into a grievance. Keep a small note about what happened. Come back in a month and notice what seems different. You do not need to solve everything now. There is a soft power in patience and steady attention. Remember the anchor phrase we used through this talk. There is nothing to hold on to. It is not a command to stop caring, but an invitation to let go of the frantic collecting of hurts that does not serve you. Let the hearth cool and notice the air lighten. When you are ready, go gently, and if this helped you at all, tell us one word in the comments about what you released and what you will try next.